Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Deborah Manyiraho from Busitema University, presenting on adoption of technology-enhanced teaching and learning innovations during COVID-19 lockdown in rural Uganda. I'm from Busitema University, and my co-author is Dr. Dennis Zami Atibuni. He will be joining us on the question and answer session. The study was particularly carried out in Tororo, which is one of the rural districts in Uganda, and mainly it focused on what type of technologies learners commonly used during the continued learning during the lockdown. Then the study also looked at the challenges and mitigation measures to the challenges for future intervention. As you may all know, COVID-19 hit our globe with very many health risks, including millions of deaths in so many countries. And being a novel pandemic, many governments were looking out for all possible ways to protect their populations. And that is how lockdowns came in. In Uganda, all social institutions, including educational institutions, were closed right from March 2020. And unfortunately, the lockdown period was not definite. Well, much later, in October, the institutions started operation, but in a phased manner. I can say that just today, 13th of May, is when the senior 2 class is just reporting back to school after 1 year and about 2 months of sitting at home. And for the lower primary school children and pre-primary, they are still at home. Now, this prolonged stay out of school is not something normal for our children and generally all stakeholders. And besides, it posed a lot of challenges, especially to the children, such as domestic violence, child labor, and so on and so forth. So this saw stakeholders coming in to try and adopt to the use of technology for continued learning. Some modalities which were used were supported by the Ministry of Education and Sports. For example, there was distribution of self-study materials, and then there were radio and television programs. Then some other modalities were just generated by the teachers and particular schools. For example, the use of WhatsApp platforms for lessons. So this study looked at how the students engaged themselves in this continued study. However, it's not clear whether the teaching and learning process went on well. We are not sure whether the teachers and learners were ready to adopt, bearing in mind that we have always handled face-to-face teaching sessions. It is even not so clear whether the learners had the necessary gadgets for the study and whether the skills for manipulating technology tools were sufficient for both learners and teachers. The study was guided by 3 objectives. The first objective was to examine the level of acceptance of technology-enhanced innovation by learners in rural Uganda. The second objective was to examine the challenges faced in adoption of technology-enhanced innovations for learning. And then the third, to explore the strategies that would mitigate the challenges for future learning. In looking at all these objectives, the study looks at the perceptions of teachers on the effectiveness of the program. The method employed by the study used a cross-sectional survey design with both qualitative and quantitative approaches. The participants in the study were students of Senior 4 in Tororo district and teachers. Students of S4 were picked upon because by the time of data collection, they had reported back to school, so it was easy to get information from them. According to the district records, there were 7,122 students. So that formed the population for our study. Using Krejci and Morgan's table for sample selection, a sample of 364 S4 students was selected using simple random sampling technique to participate in the study. 4 teachers were also selected using convenience sampling to participate in key informant interviews. The learner's tool for the study was a questionnaire with 4 sections. Section A mainly collected data on demographics of the participants. Section B had 25 closed items on adoption and use of technology. It was scored on a 5 Likert scale with strongly disagree as number 1 and strongly agree as number 5. Then section C were also closed items, 8 of them requiring yes/no answer on what exactly learners benefited from using a particular type of technology. And then section D were open-ended items on the challenges and strategies to abate the challenges. The teacher's tool was basically an interview guide which had questions that probed deeper into the challenges and general perceptions of the teachers on the effectiveness of the program. Information from the teachers would supplement on the data that was obtained from the students for meaningful conclusion. The quantitative data were analyzed using SPSS version 20, while qualitative data were analyzed using interpretative phenomenological approach to generate themes. So during the study, ethical considerations such as informed consent of the participants was sought, confidentiality and anonymity were also taken care of by ensuring that the participants used were identified by codes. So those are the results of the study. The demographic information collected showed us that most participants were between 15 and 20 years, which is really the average age for S4 students. And by gender, the participants were almost evenly distributed. As you can see, 44.9% were girls and 55.1% were boys. The majority of the participants also expressed having used one type of technology. You can see 55.4%. On further analysis, it is shown that radio was the most commonest, followed by TV, and then WhatsApp platforms in that order. This might be due to accessibility. Most learners in the rural can access radios. And then we have those whom I would say are in the urban rural, those who stay in towns. Their homes have TVs, and then their parents can afford mobile phones for WhatsApp. About the level of acceptance of technology-enhanced learning by the learners, the scores were transformed and ranged from 25 to 125, with a mean of 85.44 and standard deviation of 17.65. This is actually a moderate level of acceptance, implying that to some extent the learners embraced technology. Further analysis as seen in Table 4 shows that majority of the learners, actually 77.3%, were able to access at least some kind of technology. We are talking about a radio, a television, a phone, or a computer. However, the learners the learners expressed that they mainly used the technologies for carrying out extra research, discussing with friends, and attempting assignments. As you can see from table 4, practical activities received the least percentage, that is 37.0 of the participants saying yes. And as expected, much as there are online virtual labs with experiments, it might be difficult for a learner to carry out that experiment successfully without direct guidance from the teacher. During the whole process, there were challenges cited by both learners and teachers, and these challenges were analyzed under 5 themes: teacher-related, psychosocial, socioeconomic, management challenges, and technical challenges. So under teacher-related challenges, most learners complained that teachers on radio and TV were new to them and were often so fast, so they could not understand some of the content. For subjects like the sciences and mathematics, it was very hard to explain without seeing the students. Besides, some teachers did not have the necessary knowledge and skills to teach using computers, WhatsApp, and other technology. It may be surprising, but to date, there are still teachers who cannot operate freely with computers and phones, as one of the participants expressed. Then another theme was the psychosocial, which involved distraction by other things. Some learners confessed that instead of using the phones for lessons on WhatsApp platforms or Zoom, they actually used it to chat with their friends and watching leisure activities like music. Some would even go in for pornography. Besides this, technology-enhanced learning did not cater for individual needs of the learners. Some modalities used like the radio and TV, you would actually not see the learner, you assume there's an audience. So the audience itself was virtual. So catering for their individual needs was very difficult. It was hard for the teachers to follow up on who has been left behind, who has not understood, who has understood, and such technicalities. And when it came to learners with special needs, they would completely be left out. Then we have socioeconomic challenges, which rotated around expenses of data and internet. Then those students who were doing lessons on TV sometimes lacked subscription and their TVs were cut off. Then lack of technological tools, which was a common problem to many students. Then poor network and power cuts. In some places, there is even no electricity at all. Then some participants complained that buying dry cells for the radio was also a difficulty. Then we have management challenges, especially the timetable, which was not clear. Sometimes participants would tune on when the lesson is ending, or they tune on and find on a lesson of maybe a primary class, which did not benefit them. There was a lot of distraction at home because the children were supposed to do house chores. Lessons started as early as 9 a.m. and that is garden time for most people who stay in rural settings. Then there was lack of supervision from parents because many of them are not educated, and the radio and TV production turned out too expensive. Now, much as learners could easily access radios at home, but when it came to the production costs, the programs could not be sustained beyond a month. Then we have technical challenges, especially failure to understand content that involved drawing or calculations. And then a few participants expressed failure to operate technological tools. Now, for the strategies suggested by the participants is one, the teachers need to embrace technology-enhanced teaching and learning. They need to invest time in preparation and reduce speed, those who are conducting lessons. But those who have not yet participated need to be trained in the use of technology for teaching. Another strategy is that learners should be provided or availed with technological tools, either by the government or maybe by their own parents. Because in many cases, learners would use phones of parents, and it became tougher when some sectors opened and the parents had to move with their phones. Actually, the WhatsApp lessons for most learners who were participating ended with that. Then the radio stations and TV stations should ensure that there are no technical breakdowns during the time of the lessons. The teachers had mixed perceptions about the effectiveness of the program. For example, one who taught on radio felt he had been effective, especially when learners called in with questions and feedback. However, these teachers who had virtual classes on radio and TV would not be sure how many learners were attending their lessons. For WhatsApp platforms, not all the learners showed up for the lesson, much as for the ones who showed up, it was very beneficial. The discussions would flow. Now, when the parents resumed work, like I had already said, it became difficult to get learners on WhatsApp because they did not have phones of their own. All in all, I could say that there was moderate acceptance of technology-enhanced learning for both learners and teachers. A few learners benefited, but for future success, learners need to be availed with technology tools, and then issues of internet and power need to be addressed. Also, there is need to have proper supervision and feedback channels so that there is direct communication between the teacher and the learners for effective use. It is important for all stakeholders to know that technology-enhanced learning is an innovation that may have come to stay. As you may know, we are living in a VUCA world, VUCA standing for volatile, uncertain, complicated, and ambiguous. Today, it's the case of corona. Tomorrow, we don't know what will happen. Something still uncertain and complicated may come up. So, whether in rural or urban, there is need to embrace technology-enhanced learning as a new innovation because it's the future of education. So thank you so much for listening to me. I remain Deborah Manyiraho from Busitema University. I now welcome questions and comments. Thank you.